Perfect. Looks like we're live. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to NAITA's World Trade Week webinar. Today, we'll be discussing the US-Mexico-Canada agreement and some best practices in the digital realm to be successful in this thriving market. We really appreciate your time today and hope that you find this to be a great investment of your time this morning on this Cinco de Mayo. As we give everybody a few minutes to finish logging in and getting settled, we'll start with a short roundtable of introductions of the great trade experts on today's panel. So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you today to our esteemed panelists. First is Anne Burkett, Executive Director of the Northern Alabama International Trade Association and main sponsor for Alabama's World Trade Week. Good morning and welcome, Anne.
Good morning.
And it is also my pleasure to introduce Michelle Bingley, Online Business Development Manager for Canada from IBT Online. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. Hello, everyone.
And finally, I'm Adrian Viller. I'm Head of Business Development for IBT Online, based in the state of Florida. It's my pleasure to be here with you all today. Just a little bit about us before we get started, who IBT Online is and what we're doing here. IBT stands for International Business and Technology, and please think of us as a digital marketing and technology firm with a mission of supporting U.S. exporters in growing their international sales, their brand, and their business online and to their top international target markets. We're very lucky in working with the U.S. Commercial Service in the past 4 or 5 years. We were recognized with the President's E Award for Export Service, really for our contribution to the expansion of U.S. exports and foremost for the success that our clients have had in being successful online and to their target markets. Some additional real quick facts. We're a US-based company with over 20 years experience in the industry. We've developed relationships with over 25 US state development agencies. In Alabama, we're very proud of our relationship with the Export Alabama Alliance. And we've delivered over the years over 2,000 programs to our 650 plus corporate clients in over 24 languages, in over 40 countries and 65 different target markets. We also have a lot of free resources, 800 plus, in fact, similar to today's webinar, but also in the shape of videos and blogs and infographics about the online world in a variety of different jurisdictions. Finally, you'll see some impressive numbers at the bottom, but really it just speaks to our obsession on feedback from clients and partners and to achieving their goals. Now, for today, we have a nice little agenda lined up for you. First, we'll start off with an introduction from Anne, and she'll speak to the resources that NAITA has for Alabama's businesses and exporters and provide an introduction to Alabama's World Trade Week. Then I'll come back to discuss why exporters like you need an online business development tools before passing it on to Michelle, who will introduce some of the trade benefits and opportunities available under the new USMCA for Alabama exporters. And then she'll also touch upon some of the online environments in Canada and Mexico, how they're similar and how they're different. I'll come back again and give you some details on best practice localization and online marketing for the USMCA region, all before wrapping it up with some takeaways and, of course, your questions, which, by the way, you may submit at any time through the chat feature, which is open. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Anne Burkett, Executive Director of the North Alabama International Trade Association. Anne, welcome. Good morning. It's great to see you again. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Adrian, and good morning, everyone. Very pleased to have you all join us this morning. We're pleased to have this special event during the NAITA World Trade Week this year. And appropriately on the Cinco de Mayo, we are going to learn about trade with Mexico and Canada. I'm looking forward to hearing about the digital marketing opportunities that we have there. But before we get started, I wanted to just give you a little bit of information about NAITA. NAITA is a nonprofit membership organization. It's business-based in North Alabama, and we help companies develop markets overseas through education, training, and networking. Our next slide highlights our mission, which is to provide international trade advocacy, training, and networking to promote economic growth in North Alabama. And NAITA accomplishes its mission through our next slide through a targeted trade programs and services, including this week's World Trade Celebration. We've had quite a week so far, and we still have a few more events to go. We have had some speakers and training sessions, as well as trade tours of companies that are very active in the international marketplace that have graciously opened their doors to us to come in and see what they're doing and talk about their trade successes and challenges and how they've overcome those. So it's been a very good week, and we look forward to concluding the week tomorrow with a special breakfast. Other events that NAITA has during the year include Conversation on Trade, where we bring in elected and government officials to talk about trade policy and the impact of trade on our national, state, and local economy. We also work with the U.S. Army Security Assistance Command, which is in charge of all the foreign military sales for the Army, and we have an industry day with them to educate our companies on how they can do business through foreign military sales, as well as direct commercial sales. We do quarterly trade compliance roundtables that help our companies learn about export controls and compliance on different areas of topics of interest. And we've recently covered the Russia and Belarus sanctions, and we try to make our topics as current as possible. And this group of people are very generous in sharing their expertise. There's not a competition necessarily within this group, because they're all trying to understand how they can best comply with the export control regulations. NAITA also hosts a series of virtual programs called the NAITA Trade Talks. These came about during the pandemic and have continued because we've had a good success with these to talk about different topics such as export credit insurance, international HR issues, different topics. And so we're open to new topics. We always ask for input on what people want to hear about, because it is a great platform to be able to just sit at your desk and learn more about international trade. NAITA also hosts a series periodically called our International Trade Leadership Series, and this covers the basics of international trade, including marketing, finance, logistics, and freight transportation, as well as legal issues involved with trade. And we also have an export launch initiative that we do periodically. It's been on hold for a couple of years, but we have to bring it back. It's where companies will, we will establish a mentorship program for them, and then they will do a pitch competition to win some funding to help them develop markets overseas to implement their strategic plan. And then the NAITA International Partner Support Network is in place for us as we collaborate with companies around the globe to partner with companies here and to help those international companies find potential partners here and develop trade. So that's just a synopsis of what NAITA does. On the next slide, we couldn't do all this without, as Adrian mentioned earlier, the Export Alabama Alliance. We're a group of organizations throughout North Alabama that support international trade, and these are a list of our partners that we work with across the state to accomplish our goals and objectives to reach our mission. And our last slide today is just a slide giving our website, our phone number, our email address. If we can be of any assistance, please reach out to us. And now I'd like to turn the program back to Adrian so we can learn about digital trade in Mexico and Canada. Thank you.
Anne, thank you so much for that great overview of the many activities and resources that NAITA puts together to support Northern Alabama exporters to be successful in overseas market. You know, Alabama is really lucky to have such a supportive trade environment with NAITA, the Department of Commerce, the International Trade Center, the U.S. Commercial Service all providing ongoing and top-notch support via the Export Alabama Alliance. So now I'd like to chat just a little bit about why Alabama companies need online business development tools to help them grow, augment, and scale their exports. And really, it all has to do with ongoing shifts, and which have just exacerbated and scaled with the over the last few years of the pandemic. You know, all the trends that you see on the left side of your screen, they were all there in 2019, and they were growing. But really, what happened, the major disruption that was COVID-19, made all of those trends accelerate in a way that was really unpredictable. Just take e-commerce, for example. Pre-COVID, it was growing at single-digit figures in most developed economies like the US and Europe. But COVID pushed that growth to 20% in the United States and over 30% in some economies in Europe. And that is a lot faster than the growth of even new economies to e-commerce. And so all of those trends and those forecasts that specialists had about what would happen in 10 years really all came about in about 2 years, which really means that the online world is totally ubiquitous these days. We all spend time on Zoom, and we all spend time working online these days on email and on social media. But what also that means that the digital divide is becoming larger and larger and larger. So companies that have embraced those online tools are not just riding the wave, they are getting ahead significantly, while those companies that are still struggling to embrace digital tools are really having a rough time and are going to be left behind over the next couple of years. So a little bit about the state of online today across the world. There are 4.88 billion people online today. That's about 62% of the world's population. That has been growing, of course, significantly at about a 5% clip, which is far greater than the rate of human growth across the world. But also take a look at social media. Social media has grown almost double that pace. So it's not that people are joining the internet and are also joining social media at the same clip, but people are embracing social media tools at an increasing pace, and people are just spending more time online generally. And also adoption of mobile phones and accessing the internet from your mobile devices has grown significantly. So those are two major sort of worldwide trends to keep in mind. Remember that 95% of the world's market is outside of the United States. So when we talk about business development tools, what exactly are we talking about? We're really talking about two things. On the one hand side, we're talking about websites. And websites, when you think about websites, think about them as digital real estate. This digital real estate, whether you are a B2B company, a B2C company, a B2G company, whether you're doing e-commerce or you're not doing e-commerce, really it allows you to be found, to be understood, and to be easy to do business with in your target markets. But websites alone are not enough. You need something that drives traffic, engagement, and conversions on those websites. Once the websites exist, you got to remember, you don't live in a silo. There are other competitors, there are other alternative products and services in the market. So how do you stand out and how do you drive people to your business? Well, that's what online marketing is for, search engine marketing and social media marketing. Again, whether it's B2B, B2C, or B2G, to really help drive traffic, engagement, and conversions to your websites. Now, why do exporters need online business development tools? The short answer is because the world has gone online. Clients, prospects, future employees, if you're having a hard time hiring, a lot of people are looking at nearshoring opportunities. A lot of people are looking at hiring remote workers. Suppliers, are you having supply chain issues? Can you find other suppliers online? People are searching online in their local language and in their local online environment for business solutions. So the most effective online business development tool that you can invest into are localized websites and online marketing so that you can be found, you can be understood, and you can be easy to do business with in your target markets. To this sense, we have partnered with the Export Alabama Alliance to develop what is known as the Online Global Programs. These have been carefully designed and shown measurable success in helping companies do just that, get found, get understood, and be easy to do business with into their international target markets. Whether it's the US or whether it's Canada and Mexico, or whether it's China and Germany, we can help companies create a sales funnel to drive top line revenue, grow their exports, grow their sales and their business into whatever their target markets are. So now it is my pleasure to welcome Michelle Bingley, who is our Canada Online Business Development Manager, to the conversation. Michelle, hello, good morning to you, and how are things in the Great White North?
Doing great, Adrian. Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. So let's take a look at what is it in the USMCA, what it is and how it can help exports. So let's look at the big picture and take a look at some basics. So the USMCA is pretty well all of North America. It's a big place. It's worth noting just how many people the USMCA trade agreement covers and the landmass. In total, the three countries count for nearly 23 trillion total combined GPA. So looking at, nearly 600 million people. There are several different languages, about 165, and by far the three dominant languages are English. So we're looking at English being 317 million as a first language, Spanish with 121 million as first language, and French with 17 million as the third language. And the fourth, it drops down to Chinese as the fourth language, and there's a huge gap there, and there'll be about under 3 million. So just to give that kind of perspective. And just have some fun facts to think about that define the area for Canada, US, and Mexico. Fun things to think about with the they have the highest average income per person of any continent, the highest average food intake. Thinking about nearly 600 million people, less than 10% of the world's population. 4 times the global average per capita of consumption of energy, and in the Midwest in the US, some of the Earth's most fertile soil, and something even interesting, some of the oldest rocks on the planet. And taking a look at the US trade, and let's take a look at some of the big trade patterns that you see here in North America, and especially the trade in goods. Canada and Mexico are the number 1 and 2 markets for the US exports, followed by China. And for US imports, China is the number 1 market, followed by Canada and Mexico. So they make up the 3 dominant trade partners for the US. And looking into the services, the trade of services, US exports, Canada and China are the top markets, followed by Mexico. And what we're really seeing is in the US, exports and imports for both goods and services. Canada and Mexico, along with China, they are the top trading partners in each case, essentially. And then the benefits of the USMCA. So looking at some key tangible changes, and it's from Nafta, which took effect in 1994, when websites really were just starting to get going. And the key changes and updates from NAFTA include, increased environmental and working regulations, incentives for automobile production, access to the Canada's dairy market, and an increase in duty-free limit for Canadians who buy US. But looking at the last 3 points, we're focusing on the free flow of data and the stronger digital guidelines. It's very important that you realize that going forward, there's not really any penalty for the transfer of data, essentially what we've determined. And this is important for e-commerce, and it's absolutely key. And you can expect to see a lot more e-commerce between these markets, especially B2B, B2C, which are expected to grow considerably between these 3 markets. So section 4, let's take a look at, we'll talk a little bit about the businesses and how they're expanding into Canada, and take a closer look at their online environments. So first, we'll take a look at Mexico. Mexico being the 15th largest economy in the world and the 2nd largest in Latin America. They have, 11 free trade agreements with 46 countries around the world. And there are a couple things we want to highlight about the Mexican economy and how it affects their online environment. For example, we look at the population. It's about 1/3 of the size of the US, which is about 30%, and about 30% of the age there is under 18. So they have a young upcoming population. And again, for online, these bodies, as well as the upcoming workforce of millennials and Gen Z, are even more plugged in than their parents. It's also worth noting that just how concentrated the urban environment is, and we have infographic for you that you can download from this webinar, which gives you all the highlights of the Mexican online world, and you can just grab it from the control panel of this program. Now, looking back at this slide, we want to highlight the size of Mexico. You know, don't underestimate the distances between it. It's a relatively large landscape. And we already mentioned that despite the size, it is very concentrated. So 95% of the US exporters are located within 5 cities. And we look at 60% of the internet users located within 3 cities and in that region. And due to the Mexico's unique landscape, with 2 high altitude mountain ranges extending from the Rockies, providing landline telephone service in remote areas is expensive. And penetration of line phones per capita are pretty low compared to the other Latin American countries. This means it's a mobile first market with specific characteristics that we find in like-minded markets. Like high social media adoption, easy and early adopters of new apps and technology, and much more. So let's take a look at some more of the Mexico resources and how exporters can benefit from the Mexico online environment. So three things to really note is Mexico online environment are 74% of the population is online. So there are about 46 internet users today, and looking back in January of 2021, there has been a big change. You can see that there was roughly over 92 million. Now we're seeing 96 million, and that's about a 4 million change in internet users in just 1 year. We also noticed that there are more social media users, about 95%, than internet users, which are at 74%. So like, wow, you know, it just means that there is a growing number of people in Mexico who have multiple social media accounts. And 3, we see that the time spent online for each user is roughly about 9 hours. And you know, that truly makes that market a mobile first market. And mobile first market, meaning that making mobile connections in Mexico is the way of attracting and engaging with your target audience. So let's take a look now at Canada. Switching to Canada and their online market today. Total, there are about 39 million Canadians, with about 90% living within 150 miles of the US border. So they're very close, reachable in terms of logistics. And in terms of size, Canada is the largest country, second largest country, sorry, in the world, and the 5th largest economy. This means that the opportunity is plentiful, absolutely. And in Canada, they're involved with 14 free trade agreements with 51 countries around the world. Official language includes both English and French. French as an official language in the Quebec region, and Adrian will be speaking a little bit later about the differences between Canadian English and the Canadian French languages. Next, we will look at Canada, and I mean, Canada is plugged in. And what I mean is nearly 97% of the population use the internet. I mean, 37 million internet users, and our population is, you know, 39 million. So I mean, it's not just for the occasional Google search either. As you can see, that Canadians are spending about, you know, 6.5 hours of their time every day online, and compared to our U.S. neighbors at 92%, overall the Canadian population is online. And another thing we can highlight here is Canadians love their mobile phones. You know, 96% of Canadians own a mobile phone, and almost all of them are using smartphones. So this means Canadians can stay plugged in anytime, anywhere. And again, this showcases how Canada is mobile enabled, with 86% of users accessing the internet through their mobile phones. So I will turn this over to Adrian, and he'll speak next.
Thanks, Michelle. And I caught that you said that Canada is the biggest country. You thought you were going to get away with that. I mean, you guys have milk in a bag, and you figured that out. But you know, you don't get to say you're the biggest country quite yet.
No.
But thank you, Michelle, for that overview. And of course, you know, Michelle works from Nova Scotia, where she works with Canadian companies that are seeking to go global from Canada. And so, you know, we're very familiar with the Canadian market, and we've developed a lot of products for U.S. companies looking to be in Canada, and for Canadian companies looking to be in the U.S. And oftentimes, one of the questions that we hear on both sides of the border, to be fair, is why can't I just use my US website or my Canadian website to go global, especially if they're in English, right? And that's a question we hear very often. So if you're asking yourself the same question, you know, it's very common. But it really has to do with how browsers work and how Google in particular works, but really all search engines. They're all searcher centric. And what that means is essentially is that they will deliver results. The algorithm is built to deliver results that it thinks are relevant to that specific searcher. So think about it from this perspective. I'm in Florida. Most of the people on today's call are in Alabama. If we both go to google.com and we type in coffee shop, the odds are is that if you're in Birmingham, you're going to get a local coffee shop in Birmingham. If I'm in Fort Lauderdale, I'm going to get one here. Now, why am I not seeing a coffee shop in Birmingham, and why aren't you seeing one in Fort Lauderdale? It all has to do with relevancy and the search algorithm inside of Google, inside of Bing, inside of Baidu, inside of Yandex, inside of all the search engines, in fact, that are used out there. And so, you know, one of the things that you need to think about, especially when you compound that to different languages, different cultures, sometimes different alphabets, is that search engines are also localized. So when you think of Google, don't think of Google as one Google. There's actually 192 different country and region specific search engines within Google. In the UK, it's google.co.uk. In Spain, it's google.es. In Mexico, google.com.mx. And then most people are searching in their native language. So if your website is not relevant, or if Google doesn't think that your website is relevant to that audience, for the most part, you'll be invisible there. And, you know, some of you might be thinking, well, what if I just put a couple of pages on the back end of my website in Spanish and just have like a landing page? Will that work? And unfortunately, it doesn't work very well, because for the most part, Google looks for specific things on the website, including a local domain, including local SEO, to really index it and really place it high on the results list. So really what you need to look at in order to meet Google's expectations is to have a localized web presence. So here's a great example and a practical example of how country-specific Google's results are. So I'm in Florida, and as you heard, Michelle is up in the Great White North in Halifax saying hi to the polar bears. So I asked her, because we both have yappy dogs occasionally that like to interrupt webinars, you know, let's look up some squeakless dog toys. And I made a search here, she made a search there. You have those on your screen. The one on the right is in high contrast for those of you struggling. But really just take a look. This is the same search on the same search engine on the same day, one from Canada, one from the US. And just look at how different the search results are. You know, on the US side, you'll see some familiar brands. You'll see Chewy, you'll see Amazon, and you'll see some relevant blog posts from Yahoo. And then on the right-hand side, there's a ton of stuff that I've never heard about. There is GoDogFun.com, FluffandTough.com, there's Etsy Canada, and then there's the localized websites for Chewy and for Amazon and for Walmart, directing me to them. So really what to note here is how, you know, a search in the same language on the same search engine, but from different places, can yield entirely different result sets. So when thinking about Canada and some best practices for Canada, here's a company that we've worked with based in Florida called New England Machinery. and their target market for expansion of their exports was Canada. So doing what their goals were generating brand awareness, lead generation, and really being front of mind for existing clients and for visibility during COVID when it wasn't as easy to travel. So we developed a website in Mexico in Spanish on a .mx domain, and we also developed websites in English and in French for Canada to support their ongoing business development into that market. Now, you may be asking yourself again, how many English language websites do I need? I already have a good US.com website. How come I need another website? So obviously English is the most widely spoken language in the world, especially for business. So it might make sense just to have one English website for all English speakers, but in the online world, detail matters. And different English dialects use different keywords, and getting to the right keyword is essential to being found, to being understood, and to being easy to do business globally. Now, there are 63 countries around the world that claim to have English as a national language, but having one English language website will not give you internet access to those 1.5 billion English speakers. So here you have sort of a comparison chart between American English, Canadian English, British English. You have the Queen's English on the right-hand side, and how they spell things differently, and different vocabulary words for certain terms. In industrial terms, this gets a lot more nuanced and a lot more complex, as many of you know. But also different measurement systems. Here in the U.S., we're somehow have kept the imperial system, which was brought over by the British. They got rid of it. We didn't. To each its own. But we're stuck measuring in miles and inches. And over in the UK and in Canada, they're using the metric system, at least officially. However, and Michelle can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people still, especially in the provinces that are closest to the United States, will still talk about miles, and we'll talk about feet, and we'll talk about inches casually when measuring things. Yet, however, as I've asked Michelle many times, how's the weather up in Halifax? And she responds in centigrade, and I'm talking in Fahrenheit. I can't ever seem to appreciate whether 20 degrees is hot or cold. So really understanding those nuances and understanding how spelling changes, how vocabulary changes, and how measurement changes is really important to making sure that you have an authentic website that is understandable and is engaging for the local market. Now, Canadian English, for the most part, is an amalgam of American English and British English. There's some spelling practices are the same as they are in the UK. But in other cases, they're using American spelling in some situations. Same for vocabulary, and then there is, of course, the nuance in terms of measurement. So it is important to be fine-tuned into the market and to use the appropriate vocabulary, again, so you can be understood and found. So here's another chart with showcasing some of the differences in spelling, vocabulary, and keywords. You'll see, for example, color-centered traveling are usually spelt in Canada in the British way. However, you'll also notice that recognize is spelled the same, and for no good reason. It's just a matter of habit and practice and how it's used there. And so what is important there is, from a vocabulary standpoint, to understand the correct standpoint, the correct vocabulary words, because that informs your keyword strategy. And the keyword strategy from a search engine optimization perspective is what will allow you to be found. So using those specific keywords frequently throughout the content of your website will not just increase your competitiveness from an SEO perspective, but will also create a lot more inbound traffic to the website. So what about French? And of course, French is a particular market. 21% of the Canadian population lives in a French-speaking province, and they prefer to search in French primarily. They're very proud of their language and their heritage. 95% of the population of Quebec is in French francophone, is in fact francophone, and they prefer to speak French. And one important thing to note is that Canadian French and French, Parisian French, let's just call it, are quite distinct. Yes, it's understandable, but it's not exactly the same. The Quebecois or Canadian French has a lot of influences from 16th and 17th century idioms. There's a lot of Anglicisms. There's a little bit of influence from First Nations languages, but also the grammar is just evolved and changed from what it used to be before. So an example that's over here on this chart is just the use of din or dans le. And really, it is a grammatical nuance, but is sort of a giveaway of whether you're a Parisian French speaker or whether you are a Canadian French speaker. So understanding and utilizing proper Quebecois will be important in making sure that your website can be found and that it comes again relevant as an authentic Canadian French website, which will in fact allow you to build trust into the market. So there's a lot more additional nuances from the grammar side and from the vocabulary side and from the pronunciation side. But as many Parisian French will tell you, Quebecois is definitely not the same. But understanding the economic power of the province of Quebec and how important it is from a standpoint, it's 8.5 million people, $301 billion in GDP. So it is a significant market that one should not overlook when doing business in Canada. Here's a practical example. We talked about how picking the right vocabulary and picking the right keywords is essential to being found and to have a successful localization. So let's talk about shoes. In the US, for the most part, what we call sneakers, everybody knows what sneakers are, but we call them sneakers. Up north, they call them runners for the majority. And you see the share of how many people refer to sports shoes as sneakers versus runners in the United States, 96 and 4%. So if you're building a US website, you definitely want the keyword sneakers in there predominantly. But if you're building a website for Canada, you definitely want to use the word runner more often than you use sneaker, because 69% of searches online for sports shoes utilize the word runner as opposed to the word sneaker. So again, this is results from the same search engine. These are Canadians and Americans who speak the same language, presumably searching in English on the same search engine, and yet they're using very different keywords and therefore getting different results. What that means is that your strategy for Google ad campaigns needs to account for those nuances and differences. In Canada, you also have the issue of digital compliance. There is the emerging legislation in Canada, which may adopt parts of GDPR, and therefore the transfer of information might become a bit trickier over time. But under the existing USMCA agreement, as Michelle was saying, there are some provisions in there to really allow for the free flow of data at the moment. So even though that is something that is on the horizon in Canada, at the moment, it doesn't really affect companies. So let's talk about Mexico now very briefly and what you need to do to be successful in Mexico. Of course, having the website in Spanish and a .mx domain is very important, but there are other things you need to take into consideration. Michelle talked extensively about the success of social media and the adoption of social media in Mexico. So for the success of a good digital exporting strategy into that market, you do really need to account for online social media. So picking the right keywords, of course, utilizing Mexican Spanish, which is different from Spanish that's used in Latin America, and Spanish that's used in Spain. Noting that the currency changes, the metric system, but also having that website keyword optimized for that market, making it mobile enabled, hosting it on a local server, all will allow you to be better found, better understood, and better to be easy to do business with. So what are the results? If you localize a website properly, I'm going to show you two examples right now, one for Canada, one for Mexico. This is the example for Canada, and this is a website that we optimized for that market. And note that the traffic, which is on your left-hand screen, comes mostly from English-speaking markets, but predominantly from Canada, a little bit from the United States, a little bit from the UK, but a Canadian website can absolutely drive localized traffic from Canada. And specifically, when you see on the right-hand side, you'll notice that most of the traffic is coming from the biggest English-speaking provinces, with Quebec, which is a very big province, not having as much of an impact on traffic because the website was not in French, it was an English website. Now here's an example for Mexico. Again, this is a Spanish language website, so it's attracting traffic primarily from Mexico. It's also driving a little bit of traffic from other Spanish-speaking Latin American economies, but predominantly from Mexico. And if we look at the local traffic, you'll see that most of the traffic is coming from Mexico City, Guadalajara, and some of the major metropolitan areas in Mexico. So localization can be quite effective in a measurable way. So time to share some best practices with you on how to really make use of Canadian and Mexican online marketing. Now, in Canada specifically, again, Canada is communicating, and they're communicating through social media primarily. You'll see here that over 87% of the population in Canada utilizes social media. This is a big change year over year. People in Canada are not just embracing more social media, but they're increasingly spending more time. And the share between male and female users is roughly equal, with more than 100% of the population having one account. So people have multiple accounts on social media platforms. And so you'll see there that the adoption rate is about 3.4% or 1.1 million people joining social media platforms in Canada over the span of the last year. Now, which platforms are most familiar in Canada, or which ones are the predominant ones? It's going to be Facebook, it's going to be Instagram, it's going to be WhatsApp, it's going to be Twitter. And 87% of Canadians are interacting with businesses on social media. And then in Mexico, we have a population of 102.5 million people on social media platforms, about 78% of the population. It's growing at a 2.5% rate. Now, what's really changing in Mexico is what platforms are people using. So it used to be that Facebook was the dominant platform and some of the associated ones, YouTube and WhatsApp. But now the predominant platform, as we can see just by the rate of change, is TikTok. So if you're planning on doing social media in TikTok, even yes for B2B, you really want to be thinking about how you can leverage TikTok into your strategy. Final point about Mexico and online marketing there is just how different it is from in terms of the audience reaction to different triggers compared to the United Kingdom. In the UK, for example, this is an ad campaign that we ran there, you need about 10 times the number of engagements to get the same conversion rates. So what that means is that in Mexico, you're going to have to do a better job of really promoting your brand and really promoting your business in order to get the same conversion. It's a market that requires a significant volume in terms of marketing to yield positive results, but because it is so plugged into social, we know that it can be successful. So time for some takeaways and your questions. We are running a bit short on time, but if there are any questions, we will entertain those. If not, you can always connect with us on social media, on LinkedIn. You can connect with us and we're happy to address any additional questions that you have. But here's the takeaway. Globalization is important. Globalization and understanding how to be online into your top target markets cannot just generate the ability to be found, to be understood, and to be easy to do business with, but it will drive lead generation and will drive revenue generation for your market. Again, we have partnered with the Export Alabama Alliance and to develop the Alabama Online Global Programs, which are designed to do just that, to help you get found, to help you be understood, and to help you be easy to do business with in your top export markets. I want to thank my panel today. I want to thank Michelle all the way from Halifax, and I want to thank Anne for the opportunity to be a part of Alabama's World Trade Week and to presenting alongside of you. If you have any questions, you'll see that our emails are on the screen, and you can also visit us at ibt.onl. Please do find us on LinkedIn. We're happy to connect with you and address any questions. And we'll be in touch with all of you after today's webinar via email. If you want, we will be sending you a recording of today's webinar as well. And if you have any other questions or if you want a copy of the presentation, just simply respond to that email and we'll happily engage with you. Thank you all so very much, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your afternoon on this Cinco de Mayo. Go ahead and celebrate and we'll see you around for the next World Trade Week. Thank you all so very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.